You know that number that keeps you up at night? $500,000. It sounds impossible when you're staring at a checking account with $3,000 in student loans that could fund a small country. But here's what nobody tells you about hitting $500,000 in retirement savings. It's not just a milestone, it's a completely different game with completely different rules. Most people think $500,000 means you're rich. You're not. But you're also not broke anymore. You're in this weird financial middle ground where the math suddenly starts working for you instead of against you. Your money stops being something you constantly stress about and becomes something that actually works while you sleep. Here's the thing about this number. It unlocks a lifestyle that most people don't even know exists. Not yacht money, not quit your job tomorrow money, but something way more valuable. Breathing room, options. The ability to say no to things that suck without your heart racing. And if you're sitting there thinking this milestone is impossible, stick around because I'm going to show you exactly how people are getting there and what changes when they do. The first thing that changes when you're working toward $500,000 is your entire identity as an investor. Right now, if you're like most people, you're in pure accumulation mode. Every dollar matters because you're building from basically nothing. You're the person checking your brokerage app at lunch, getting excited when your account goes up $200, and feeling personally victimized when the market drops 3%. But something weird happens as you get closer to $500,000. Your brain starts shifting from hoarder mode to gardener mode. You're not just piling up money anymore. You're cultivating it. And honestly, this mental shift can mess with your head if you're not ready for it. Let me explain what I mean. When you have $10,000 invested, a 10% market drop means you lost $1,000. That sucks, sure, but you can mentally recover pretty quickly. You tell yourself it's temporary, maybe skip Chipotle for a week to feel better, and move on. But when you're approaching $500,000 and the market drops 10%, you just watched $50,000 evaporate. That's more than most people make in an entire year. That's a down payment on a house. That's gone in a single bad week. This is where people completely lose their minds and make terrible decisions. They panic sell, they move everything to cash, they convince themselves the entire financial system is rigged. But here's what you need to understand. At $500,000, you're finally wealthy enough that market volatility becomes noise instead of a crisis. Yeah, $50,000 sounds insane when you say it out loud, but it's 10% of your portfolio. And if you've been investing long enough to accumulate $500,000, you already know that 10% swings are just part of the deal. The psychological shift here is massive. You have to train yourself to think in percentages instead of absolute dollars. You have to accept that your account will swing by amounts that used to represent your entire net worth. And weirdly, you have to become more conservative and more aggressive at the same time. More conservative because you actually have something to lose now. When you had $5,000 invested, who cares if you threw it all into some random stock your cousin told you about? Worst case, you're back to zero and you start over. But at $500,000, reckless moves can set you back years, or even decades. You can't afford to be stupid anymore. But you also have to be more aggressive because this is where compound interest really starts flexing. At $500,000 earning 8% annually, you're making $40,000 a year without doing anything. That's more than a lot of people contribute to their retirement accounts total. Your money is now working harder than most humans. And if you get scared and move everything to a savings account earning 3%, you're literally costing yourself $25,000 a year in potential growth. Every single year. This is the paradox of $500,000. You have enough to lose that you should care about risk, but you also have enough that playing it too safe becomes its own form of risk. You're not trying to get rich anymore, you're trying to stay rich while also getting richer. It's a completely different game, and most people aren't prepared for this mental shift when it happens. All right, let's talk about why $500,000 is when compound interest stops being this cute math concept your finance teacher talked about and becomes an actual money printing machine. And I'm going to use real numbers here because this is where things get absolutely wild. At $500,000, assuming you're getting an average 8% annual return, which is pretty reasonable for a diversified portfolio over the long term, you're making $40,000 a year in investment gains. That's without adding a single additional dollar. Your money is just sitting there doing push-ups and getting stronger while you're sleeping or watching Netflix or arguing with strangers on the internet. Now here's where it gets interesting. Let's say you're also still contributing because you're not retired yet. Maybe you're maxing out your 401k and IRA, so you're adding about $30,000 a year. That's $70,000 in total annual growth. $40,000 from returns, $30,000 from contributions. But wait, it gets better. Next year, you're not starting from $500,000 anymore. You're starting from $570,000. So that 8% return isn't $40,000 anymore, it's $45,600. And the year after that, your returns jump to $51,688. You see what's happening here? Your returns are growing faster than your contributions. The money you're not even touching is working harder than the money you're actively adding. This is the inflection point that most personal finance gurus don't talk about. Everyone loves to preach about the importance of saving and contributing. And yeah, that stuff matters when you're starting out. But at $500,000, your investment returns start to dwarf your contributions. The snowball you've been pushing uphill for years suddenly crests the peak and starts rolling downhill, picking up speed and mass on its own. Let me put this in perspective. If you started investing at 25 with $0 and contributed $6,000 a year, it would take you about 15 years to hit your first $100,000, assuming that same 8% return. 15 years of grinding, sacrificing, watching your account slowly creep upward like a snail climbing Mount Everest. But once you hit $500,000, you can go from $500,000 to $600,000 in less than 3 years, even if you stopped contributing entirely. That's the power of compounding at scale. Your money becomes this self-sustaining organism. It feeds itself, grows itself, multiplies itself. You're no longer the primary driver of your wealth. Your existing wealth is. And here's the kicker. Most people never get to experience this phase because they either give up too early or they reach this point and immediately start pulling money out for lifestyle inflation. They finally hit $500,000 and decide they deserve a boat or a vacation home or a luxury car lease. And look, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life, but understand that every dollar you pull out at this stage costs you way more than $1. It costs you all the future growth that dollar would have generated. Here's something nobody prepared me for when I started learning about financial independence. The real luxury of having $500,000 in retirement accounts isn't what you can buy. It's what you can refuse. Think about your job right now. Maybe you like it, maybe you tolerate it, maybe you actively hate it, but you show up anyway because you need the paycheck. That's the reality for most people. You're trapped in this weird hostage situation where you trade your time and sanity for money, because the alternative is not being able to pay rent or eat food. Not exactly a position of strength. But when you're sitting on $500,000 in retirement savings, something shifts. You're not financially independent yet. Let's be clear about that. You can't just walk away from your income and live off your investments forever, at least not comfortably. But you do have something incredibly valuable. You have options. Let's say your boss asks you to work this weekend for the 3rd time this month. Before, you'd probably say yes, because you're worried about looking like you're not a team player, or maybe you're concerned about job security, or you just don't feel like you have the leverage to push back. But with $500,000 sitting in your retirement accounts, that conversation changes. You can say no. And if your boss doesn't like it, and if that somehow puts your job at risk, you have a cushion. You have time to find something better. You're not going to be homeless next month if things go sideways. Or maybe you've been thinking about switching careers entirely. You've always wanted to try something different, but it would mean taking a pay cut or starting over at the bottom of a new field. That's terrifying when you're living paycheck to paycheck. But with $500,000 invested generating $40,000 a year in returns, you can afford to take that risk. You can take a lower-paying job that you actually enjoy because your investments are covering part of your future lifestyle. You're not betting your entire financial future on one decision anymore. This is what financial advisors mean when they talk about walking away money. It's not necessarily enough to walk away forever, but it's enough to walk away from situations that aren't working for you. Bad job, toxic workplace, career path that's making you miserable. When you have $500,000 invested, You're no longer making decisions purely out of financial desperation. You're making them from a position of choice. And honestly, this might be the biggest lifestyle upgrade of all. It's not about buying fancy things or impressing people on Instagram. It's about reclaiming control over your own life. It's about being able to say no without your heart racing. It's about knowing that if everything falls apart tomorrow, you'll be okay. Not rich, not set for life, but okay. You have time, you have options, you have breathing room. That psychological freedom is worth more than any car or vacation or designer whatever. It changes how you walk into every room, every conversation, every negotiation. You're no longer desperate, and people can feel that. And weirdly, when you stop needing things so badly, they tend to come to you easier. Now, let's talk about something that sounds boring, but will literally save you hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. Taxes. I know, you'd rather watch paint dry. But when you're working toward $500,000 in retirement savings, tax strategy stops being optional and becomes absolutely critical. Here's what most people don't realize. The difference between someone who hits $500,000 at age 50 and someone who hits it at age 45 isn't always about earning more money or getting lucky in the market. A lot of times it's about tax efficiency. And I'm not talking about sketchy loopholes or hiding money in the Cayman Islands. I'm talking about legitimate strategies that the government literally created for you to use. Let's start with the basics. When you're early in your career making $50,000 a year, throwing everything into a traditional 401k makes perfect sense. You get the tax deduction now when you're in a lower bracket, and you'll pay taxes later in retirement when you're presumably in an even lower bracket. That's the theory anyway. But here's where it gets interesting. As you accumulate wealth and approach $500,000, that assumption might be completely wrong. If your investments are growing the way they should, you might actually be in a higher tax bracket in retirement than you are now, especially once required minimum distributions kick in at age 73, forcing you to pull out taxable income whether you need it or not. This is where Roth conversions become your best friend. And before your eyes glaze over, let me explain why this matters. A Roth conversion is basically paying taxes on your traditional retirement money now, so it can grow tax-free forever. You're voluntarily giving the IRS money today to avoid giving them way more money later. Here's a real example. Let's say you're 40 years old with $200,000 in a traditional IRA. You're in the 22% tax bracket. You could convert $50,000 to a Roth IRA, pay $11,000 in taxes now, and that $50,000 plus all its future growth is yours tax-free forever. Fast forward 30 years, that $50,000 growing at 8% becomes $503,000. And you don't owe a single penny in taxes on that growth. But if you left it in the traditional IRA, you'd owe taxes on all $503,000 when you withdraw it. At a 24% tax bracket, that's $120,720 in taxes. You just saved yourself over $100,000 by being strategic about when you paid taxes. The key is doing these conversions in years when your income is lower. Maybe you're between jobs. Maybe you had a down year in your business. Maybe you're strategically taking time off. These are golden opportunities to convert chunks of your traditional retirement money to Roth at lower tax rates. Another strategy that becomes critical at this level is tax loss harvesting. This is where you sell investments that have lost value to offset gains from investments that have made money. Sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. Let's say you made $20,000 on one investment but lost $10,000 on another. Instead of paying taxes on the full $20,000 gain, you can offset it with the loss and only pay taxes on $10,000. And here's the beautiful part. You can use up to $3,000 in losses each year to offset your regular income, and any extra losses carry forward to future years. This stuff adds up fast when you're managing a portfolio approaching $500,000. The bottom line is this. Getting to $500,000 isn't just about saving more and investing smart. It's about keeping more of what you earn by being strategic about taxes. Every dollar you save in taxes is a dollar that can compound and grow for decades. And over a lifetime, that difference is massive. Here's where things get absolutely insane. And this is the part that's going to make you want to start investing today if you haven't already. Once you hit $500,000, the journey to $1 million becomes way shorter than the journey from 0 to 500,000. And I'm not talking about some motivational nonsense here. I'm talking about actual math that's going to blow your mind. Remember how I said it might take you 15 years to get to your first $100,000 if you're starting from 0 and contributing $6,000 a year? Well, the jump from 500,000 to 1 million is the fastest doubling you'll ever experience in your investing journey, assuming you keep doing what you've been doing. Let's run the numbers. You've got $500,000 invested, you're still contributing $30,000 a year because you're not retired yet, and you're maxing out your retirement accounts. Your portfolio is earning 8% annually on average. At that rate, you'll hit $1 million in about 9 years. 9 years. That's it. But here's what makes this stretch so psychologically weird. You're going to watch your account grow by amounts that used to represent your entire net worth. In year 1, your returns alone will be $40,000. That's more than you're contributing. By year 5, your annual returns will be around $65,000. Your money is earning more than most people's salaries, and it's doing it automatically while you're watching Netflix or sleeping or scrolling through social media. This is where a lot of people start to get impatient. They see how close they are to $1 million, and they want to accelerate it. They start looking at riskier investments, crypto, individual stocks, options trading, whatever promises, faster returns. And look, I get it. When you can see the finish line, you want to sprint. But this is exactly when you need to stay disciplined. Here's the thing about the $500,000 to $1 million stretch. It's not actually the finish line. It's more like the end of the tutorial level in a video game. You're finally getting good at this game, and the real wealth building is about to begin. Because once you hit $1 million, that same 8% return is now $80,000 a year. And if you keep contributing and stay invested, you'll go from 1 million to 2 million in about 7 years. The snowball just keeps getting bigger and faster, but you can completely derail this momentum by getting greedy or impatient right now. I've seen people hit $500,000 and immediately start making stupid decisions because they think they're invincible. They dump $100,000 into some speculative investment that promises 20% returns. It crashes, they lose half of it, and suddenly they're back at $450,000. They just cost themselves years of progress because they couldn't stick with what was already working. The path from $500,000 to 1 million is about patience and consistency. It's about trusting the process that got you here. It's about understanding that boring works. Index funds work. Dollar cost averaging works. These strategies aren't sexy, they're not going to make you feel like a genius investor, but they're going to get you to $1 million with way less stress and way more certainty than trying to outsmart the market. And once you do retire, here are 10 things you'll never worry about again.